Good morning, children. Yesterday, in the first class, we have discussed about what is the meaning of the reproduction and what is the meaning of the lifespan, the different organisms, so how they are differ with one another with respect to the lifespan. And also we have discussed about the types of the reproduction. In that first one, we have discussed about the asexual reproduction, asexual reproductive structures, and also we have discussed about the vegetative propagation. Today in this class, let us discuss the very important type of the sexual reproduction. During period of evolution, it is believed that the sexual reproduction is responsible for the evolution. Okay, let us start the class with sexual reproduction. First of all, the question arises, what is the meaning of sexual reproduction? I told you while we are discussing about the difference between the sexual reproduction and the asexual reproduction. So there it is a means options. Here in case of this sexual reproduction, it is a reproduction that involves the formation of male and female gametes either by the same individual or by different individuals of the opposite sex. See here, it is very important. So the reproduction that involves the formation of male and female, okay, and it results in the offspring that are not identical to the parents or amongst themselves. I told you clearly in the last class, because during sexual reproduction, when there is a fusion of male and female gamete takes place, it is responsible for the variations. I told you in the last class again, the variation is the degree of differences when compared to the parents to the offspring. That's why, okay, so during the sexual reproduction, whatever the offspring produces, that offsprings are not identical to the parents or amongst themselves. And it is an elaborate, complex and slow process as compared to the asexual reproduction, because when we are discussing about the characteristics of asexual reproduction, I told you it is not a complex, it is a simple and it is a very rapid process in case of asexual reproduction. But in case of the sexual reproduction, it is an elaborate step-by-step mechanism, and it is not a simple, it is a very complex process and it requires a lot of time, so that it is considered as a slow process as compared to the asexual reproduction. And the period of growth to reach in maturity for sexual reproduction is called juvenile phase. See, especially when it comes to the not only in the plants and animals, the period of growth to reach in maturity for sexually they become active. Until then, that whatever the phase it is there, it will be considered as a juvenile phase. In plants, it is called vegetative phase. In animals, we use the terminology juveniles. Okay, so that's why we call the phase a juvenile phase. And after this one, see, in higher plants, how we will identify, yes, this plant is sexually become active. The flowering indicates the end of the vegetative phase and the beginning of the reproductive phase, the flowering. Okay, if any plant, either it will be monocot or a dicot, any plant, if it starts flowering, that is the indication of that flower is the indication of the beginning of the reproductive phase. Until then, it will be considered as that is vegetative phase then. And see, the plants are majorly, basis of the lifespan, they are categorized into, majorly especially in the plants, we can identify based on the lifespan, annuals, biennials and perennials. Annuals in Kannada generally we call Ekavarshika Sasyagalu, in biennials, Dvaivarshika Sasyagalu, and perennials means Bahuvarshika Sasyagalu. Because yesterday some students they were asking, sir, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೂ ಹೇಳಿ, it's okay, no problem, but you should try to understand. It is a very easy terminology. Annuals, okay, then biannuals and perennials. What is the meaning of annuals? See, if any plant, okay, it will complete its complete life cycle within 1 year. Then such a plants will be considered as annuals, Ekavarshika Sasyagalu. They will complete whatever the juvenile phase, reproductive phase, senescence, all these three phases will complete within 1 year. Then such a plants are considered as annuals. And when it comes to the biennials, Dvaivarshika Sasyagalu, generally, see, these plants, they require at least 2 years. That means to complete their lifespan. That is what I said, the vegetative phase, reproductive phase, and to complete the senescent phase, they require years. That's why they are considered the biennials. And after that one, perennials. Perennial means Bahuvarshika Sasyagalu. They require number of years. Okay. For example, if we take an example of ficus bengalensis, okay, in such a cases it requires a number of years, then more than 200 like that. It may reaches up to, there are number of cases it is recorded up to 700, 800 years like that. So, but here, why we are discussing that point, in case of annuals and biennials plants, we can easily identify the vegetative phase, reproductive phase, and senescence phase, all these three phases, because they are having short term lifespan. That's why we can identify all these three phases. But in case of perennial plant, these phases are very difficult to identify because average lifespan of human beings not more than nowadays 62, maximum that is 80 years. Within that we cannot identify. Okay, so that's why in perennial plants these phases are very difficult to identify. And some plants exhibit unusual flowering. There are rare cases, of course, but this type of the flowers also we can identify. Bamboo species. Okay, bamboo, one of the gigantic grass. But there are, in bamboo also there are number of species are there. But this bamboo species flower only once in their lifetime. It's about 50 to 100 years lifespan. But during these phases, okay, if it is produces the fruits, that is an indication of the completion of the life cycle. That is means, if it is produces large number of the fruits, then it will be end of that bamboo species. Okay, so that is one of the example for the unusual flowering. And Stabila kuntiana, it is commonly known as Nilkuranji. Okay, so this is also one of the rare species. This plant flowers once in 12 years. So this species is generally found in the stretch of the Tamil Nadu, or the border of the Karnataka and Kerala. Okay, so you can identify here the wonderful blue color flowers. Okay, yeah. So then after that one, let us discuss the sexual sexual reproduction when it comes to the animals. How it will be? They are different from one to another, as well as how can we identify these phases with respect to the plants and animals. In animals, juvenile phase is followed by morphological and physiological changes prior to active reproductive behavior. From the beginning of the birth, until they reaches the maturity, see the animals, how to identify. So they are in the juvenile phase until they become sexually active. That is morphological or physiological changes prior to active reproductive behavior. It is purely depends upon hormonal changes. See, hormones are the major, the factors responsible for the changes of one phases to another phases in case of the animals. Okay, then, and if you take an example of the birds, generally these birds living in nature, they lay eggs. That means they start up, laying of eggs. That is an indication in case of the birds also. But the birds living in nature lay eggs only seasonally. However, the birds in captivity, in poultry farm, boys, they will be not considered as a natural examples, because they are induced for the production of the eggs and actually generally meat purpose. That's why those birds, poultry farm birds will be not taken example for the this type of the examples. But natural birds living in nature lay eggs only seasonally. However, the birds in captivity can be made to be lay eggs throughout the years. because of the artificial purpose then. And in the female of the placental mammals exhibit cyclic changes in the ovaries, accessory ducts and hormones during reproductive phase. It is called estrous cycle. We can generally say they are conceiving animals. We can also say non-primates. We can give very best examples: cows, sheep, rats, deer, dog, tiger. So these are all the animals that undergo estrous cycle. Okay, so what is the meaning of estrous cycle? See here, the females of the placental mammals exhibit cyclic changes in the ovaries, axillary duct and hormones during the reproductive phases. Okay, then, and in case of the higher mammals like monkeys, apes and humans, we can identify the menstrual cycle. Okay, so this menstrual cycle, it can be characteristic features, a very important characteristic features of the, that is, mammals. And see here, based on the breeding seasons, the mammals are classified into two types in case of sexual reproducing organism. So that is, we can say a seasonal breeders and continuous breeders. See, the word itself indicates the meaning. The mammals are living in natural conditions. Generally they exhibit a reproductive cycle only during favorable seasons. And when it comes to the continuous breeders, they are reproductively active throughout their reproductive phases. We can give examples: seasonal breeders, you know, uh, goats, sheep, cows, even dog, cats. These are all will be given example for seasonal breeders. But if you take an example of the rabbit and even rats, so they will continuously breed. Number of multiple times. They will give birth to their young ones multiple times. Then they will be continuously they breed. Okay. So after this one, if you take a example of the last phases, senescence. So generally, I told you there are three major phases we have to undergo, including human beings also. From the beginning, it's a juvenile phase, and then after it will be reproductive phase, and later a senescence. Okay, senescence is commonly known as old age. Old age. That means it is the last phase of the lifespan. Okay, it is the last phase of the lifespan and end of the reproductive phase. How can we identify? Yes, these plants or animals, they are attained a senescence phase. During this, concomitant changes generally so occurs in the body a slow rate of metabolism, and ultimately, okay, step by step, they are, ultimately it leads to death. So before that, reaching the senescence, they will be reproductively active. Whenever they reaches the senescence phase, immediately, that is the end of the reproductive phase, this stops the production of the reproductive cells also, and so slowly, they undergo metabolic changes. Ultimately, it leads to the death. In plants and animals, I told you in the beginning also, hormones. Hormones causes a transition between these three phases. I told you whenever the juvenile phase, that means in the beginning stage in case of the plant, of vegetative, they are not bearing any type of the flowers. Whenever they start producing the flowers, that is an indication of that flowers, they become sexually active. And whenever it reaches the senescence, how we can identify? It is based on the hormonal changes. Hormones are the major, components. They are responsible for the transition between these three phases. And the interaction between hormones and environmental factors, they regulate the reproductive process and associated a behavioral expression of an organisms. Okay, so because environment is also a major factor, because here the organisms, they are found in environment, even not only hormones, including environmental factors, they regulate the reproductive process and associated behavior expressions of a particular organism. And here, during the sexual reproduction, especially, we can find the events The sexual reproducing organisms, they will undergo majorly there are three events, or we can also say stages in the sexually reproducing organism, or stages in the sexual reproduction. There are three, the stages or the event we can identify in these sexual reproducing organisms: pre-fertilization, fertilization, and post-fertilization events. Again, these pre-fertilization events are classified into gametogenesis and gametotransfer. Let it be today. We will continue these things in the next class. Thank you.